Hey YouTube, Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Supreme King Zark Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile for October 2021. The Zark deck is always one of my favorites to update. It's just a really fun pendulum deck, which the main focus of the deck is to summon out the boss monster Supreme King Zark, used by Zark in the Arc 5 anime. This card requires you basically fusion summoning it using 4 dragons with a fusion, synchro, exceeds, or pendulum, but there are much easier ways using the pendulum magician cards to summon this card out into the field, and once you do, it's definitely a scary boss monster for your opponent to have to get over. I'm always happy with the results every time I update the deck, and with the latest ban list, we've just seen an even stronger deck be formed with more cards on the list be lifted for us to use for the Zark deck. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So we'll go ahead and start off with the main deck for the Supreme King Dragon monsters. I am running 3 Supreme King Dragon Darkworm. Just another great setup card, being able to search out our main go-to pendulum scales for the Supreme King Zark. This card, having the graveyard setup to just special summon onto the field if we control no monsters, doesn't take up our normal summon, and when it's normal summon or special summon, we can add either one of the gates from our deck to our hand. I'm running 2 of the Supreme King Gate 0 and 1 Supreme King Gate Infinity. Infinity is in the deck, so we have the option, if our opponent destroys Zark, for us to pendulum summon it back onto the field, being a level 12 monster, and the Supreme King Gate Infinity being a scale 13 card, and the Gate 0 being 0, meaning it's perfectly easy for us to summon Zark back onto the field using these 2 cards as the pendulum scales for the pendulum summon. For our I would say the magician cards that also count as the different dragon cards we need, I'm running 3 of the fresh off the ban list Double Iris Magician. This card is at 3 once again. It's always treated as a pendulum dragon card. That is the main important part of the card you want to remember, being the fact that you need a pendulum dragon to use with our chronograph sorcerer, which is the main way we summon out Zark using this deck, and Double Iris just has the additional option for the double damage pendulum scale effect, and also for just the search option of our different pendulum graph cards we run in the deck. I also run 2 Purple Poison Magician. This is the Fusion Dragon option in the deck. I only run 2 of this card. I really feel it's all you need, since it is a pendulum call target for us to add to our hand, making it that much more easily available for us to use with this card. Same goes for Black Fang Magician. This one is the Xyz Dragon, or XYZ Dragon, that we use for the requirements for the summon. And lastly, the 1 White Wing Magician. I really only run the 1. If you wanted to run a second copy of this card, you can always drop one of the Harmonizing Magician we run when we get to that part of the deck, but it's player preference there. It is treated as the Synchro Dragon card needed for the deck, and even though we have all these cards, there are still other options for us to summon out in the deck with the many different cards we use for all of the requirements to summon Zark out onto the field. But the main go-to pendulum card we use for summoning out Zark is Chronograph Sorcerer. I run 3 of this card and 1 Time Gazer Magician, just for the additional special summon option with Chronograph Sorcerer, or setting it up in our pendulum scale. But with Chronograph Sorcerer, if a card you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. Then you can special summon 1 monster from your hand. You can banish this card you control plus 4 monsters from your hand, field, and or graveyard, each with Pendulum Dragon, Xyz Dragon, Synchro Dragon, and Fusion Dragon in their names, and special summon 1 Supreme King Zark from your extra deck. It is treated as a fusion summon, so the fact that it treats it as a fusion summon means we can summon Zark back onto the field after our opponent were to destroy it using our gate pendulum scales. But once again, the cards we spoke of before all count for the requirements needed for us to summon Zark. So the biggest part is us just searching out these cards for us to use. But with 3 Double Iris, it's that much easier for us to have this card available in our hand, and then just searching out all the other cards with either some of the other pendulum monsters we run or our pendulum call spell card. And for additional Supreme King Dragon power, I also run 2 Supreme King Dragon Odd Eyes. Now, this card can also be summoned out quite easily to the field with cards like Pendulum Dimension, giving us a boss monster on the field. You just need to tribute 2 Supreme King Dragon monsters to special summon this card from your hand. So if you have 2 of your Supreme King Darkworm on the field, let's say brought out by a Pendulum summon, you can just tribute them, and then you can summon out Supreme King Dragon Odd Eyes onto the field. If you have your scales set with the Infinity Gate infinity with this card. If you control a monster, you cannot pendulum summon, and this effect cannot be negated. Once per turn, if you control Supreme King Zark, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls and gain life points equal to its attack. So with this card, you have the option of summoning Supreme King Dragon Odd Eyes with the level it is back onto the field, but only if you control no monsters. But still a pretty good boss monster to rely on, just like we are running our Supreme King Dragon Clearwing and also our Supreme King Dragon Dark Rebellion in the extra deck to use. For some of the additional pendulum support, I also run 3 Oak Dragon Magician, one of my favorite low scales to run in the deck, and when I don't have the Supreme King Gates set up on the field, just because we can recycle our Magicians if we use them for extra deck resources back into our hand for us to use, since Chronograph Sorcerer specializes in, specifies that we have to banish cards you control plus 4 monsters from your hand, field, and or graveyard. It doesn't count the extra deck, so being able to add them back to our hand to use with Oak Dragon is a big help there. And I also run the 3 Harmonizing Magician, just another way to special summon those resources onto the field for us to use. If you don't want them to be banished along with this effect, you'll use them for an Xyz summon. Then they'll go to the graveyard, which they can still be used to banish back onto the cost of Chronograph Sorcerer from the graveyard. More search power, and the final monster we run in the main deck is Performapal Skullcrobat Joker, being able to search out any of the Magician cards. So once again, just another normal summon target if we don't have Darkworm, to then add any of the needed cards back to our hands. Cards at 2 now on the ban list, so just another added power boost to the deck overall. And that is it for the monsters. We'll now move on to the spells. I run 3 Duelist Alliance. If there is a card in the Pendulum Zone, you add 1 Pendulum monster, or a Pendulum spell or trap from your deck to your hand. You can activate 1 Duelist Alliance per turn, so you can add Pendulum Call, or any of the other cards I spoke of before. Sadly, you can't add Supreme King Dragon Odd Eyes, but you can add your Double Iris Magician, since it's always treated as a Pendulum Dragon card, being one of these search targets off of Duelist Alliance. And for the Pendulum Call I spoke of, running 2 of this, the same logic comes down to when I did my Pendulum Magician deck profile update. It's just more of a search option with Duelist Alliance, which if your opponent would hopefully hit the Duelist Alliance, avoiding you even adding this card to your hand. It beats then you having to discard a card for your opponent to then Ash Blossom, which they'll try to avoid that also, because most of the time I can discard Darkworm, setting it up in the graveyard, controlling no monsters, and even if they do hit this card with cards like Ash Blossom to prevent my search, I can still at least summon Darkworm onto the field and gain a search through that card. For some of the one-ofs for these spells, I run 1 Polymerization. Now, this is in here because it works very, very well with Pendulum Dimension, having the resources when we summon a Synchro monster onto the field. 1 Dragon Shrine, once again, for Darkworm setup in the graveyard. Same with Foolish Burial. It's just a very, very important card for the entire Zark setup, so I want to see it more often than not, and just sending it to the graveyard from my main deck is a big help to do so. And lastly, 1 Star Pendulum Graph, being a searchable card off of the newly at 3 Double Iris Magician. Moving on now to the traps, I run 2 Pendulum Dimension. This card helps with just our overall playstyle in the deck. If you special summon any of these monsters using a Pendulum monster as material while this card is already face up in your spell and trap card zone, you can activate the appropriate effects, and you cannot apply the same effect for Pendulum Dimension for the rest of this turn, even if this card leaves the field. If it's a fusion, you special summon 1 monster from your deck with the same original level as that fusion monster in defense, but negates effects. So if you summon out your Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, using it is a level 8 monster, and the level 8 monster we can summon out is Supreme King Dragon Odd Eyes, just giving us a level 8 monster like that onto the field. If you Synchro summon, you can add 1 Polymerization from your deck to your hand, so meeting the requirements to then just fusion summon by going into a Synchro, which can easily be done with cards like Harmonizing Magician. And also with the last one being XYZ, you take a tuner from your deck with an equal or lower level than the Xyz monster and add it to your hand, which is another way to add Harmonizing to your hand to use if you were to make a rank 4 monster, which is the easiest and lowest rank we make, so a guaranteed search for any of our level 4 monsters. And lastly, for the traps, just the 1-time Pendulum Graph, another search option with Double Iris Magician, and a good way just to take care of a good number of our opponent's cards on the field by using our Pendulum resources. And that is it for the main deck. We'll now move on to the extra deck. I run one Supreme King Zark. It is your go-to boss monster. I feel you only really need the one. Once you get this card out, it's a resource that can be brought back onto the field. Like I said, being Pendulum Summon with our Infinity Gates. And also, it must be Fusion Summon, cannot be Special Summon by other ways. If this card is Special Summon, destroy all of your other cards. So it must be Fusion Summon with this option. And if this card is Special Summon, destroy all cards your opponent controls. It cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Your opponent cannot target this card with card effects, and when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can special summon one Supreme King Dragon monster from your deck or extra deck, and if this card in the monster zone is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can place it in the Pendulum Zone. So another lower scale for you to use, but another target with this card is just for you to summon out your Supreme King Dragon Odd Eyes onto the field, having another boss monster to go up against your opponent. This is what the character Zark did in the anime by bringing out all the different Supreme King Dragons to use against his opponents. For the other additional fusion plays, I run the one Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon. You can fusion summon this card out in the deck, but most of the time it's just an Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon target for the different scales we run, with the option of our gate cards being level 7 monsters. Also, one Perform Pal Gatling Ghoul. You can use Skullcrobat Joker and one of your level 5 or higher Dark Dragon monsters to make this card, or even just Dark Monster. It doesn't even require just a dragon for this particular one, with Polymerization. Starving Venom Fusion Dragon being another target, just need 2 dark monsters on the field, so our Dark Worms especially. And for the Xyz monsters, one Time Star Magician, one Supreme King Dragon, Dark Rebellion, just another great boss monster to use and can be easily made with all the Dark Attribute Pendulum monsters, one Tornado Dragon, and one Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon. Once again, the easy way to make this is with our level 7 gate monsters to overlay into, and then using it for another Link Summon to then go into Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon. For these Synchro monsters, I run one Supreme King Clearwing. Now, we don't have, sadly, Supreme King Venom Dragon. It is on the ban list still, and will remain there. It's just too powerful of a card to use. Also, one Borreload Savage Dragon for all the different Link monsters we run, along with one Blasting Draco Slayer for the shuffle back option with our pendulums. And lastly, one Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon. I don't use it often, but you can make this card with Time Gazer Magician and Harmonizing if this is one of the cards you special summon off of Harmonizing Magician. For the Link monsters, I run one Grand Soulful Chord Museshia. This is for recycle power with cards face up in our extra deck. One Celine, Queen of the Master Magicians, for more counter buildup. And one Zephyra Metaltron, a great way just to make use of our extra deck plays using this card on the field. As for the go-to plays we can make with this deck, your main play comes down to just how quickly you can get Zark out on the field. You'll need Chronograph Sorcerer to resolve this for the search. So if you have this in your hand, the next best way is to either go for the search option with your Pendulum Call, but you'll also need the scale set up. So either you'll have the cards needed in your hand as well for a proper Pendulum scale setup. So then you'll set these scales ready to then get your other additional monsters out on the field. You will use Pendulum Call, giving you a discard, which if you discard your Dark Worm off of it, it's just that much better of a resource, because then after you discard Dark Worm to the graveyard, you'll be able to add off of the Pendulum Call 2 of the 4 of the Magician cards needed, which I always like to go for White Wing since it's one of the lower numbers. There's a good chance that I could just have Double Iris in my hand to begin with. But with it, I am given the 2 cards, and most of the time you can even go for your Harmonizing Magician to then Pendulum Summon out onto the field, giving you then the special summon of another Magician, and then overlaying the 2 for more resources, which one of them can be your Time Star Magician, detaching that to give you another search with this card. For this card's detached, adding a Dark Spellcaster, which can be the final requirement needed if you had the additional card in your hand to use. Adding the Purple Poison Magician with that, if you opened up the Double Iris, the Purple Poison, searching the White Wing off of the Pendulum Call, and detaching the Black Fang Magician. If you also Pendulum Summon the Chronograph Sorcerer during the play when you did your initial Pendulum Summon with Harmonizing Magician, you can then have the 3 monsters needed for the requirements met to banish, to then summon out your Supreme King Zark onto the field, to then go up against your opponent. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Like I said, I love updating Zark, so finally able to update it with the newest support from the October 2021 ban list is a lot of fun. I definitely enjoyed updating it this time around, and I hope you all enjoy playing it as well. It's definitely one of the more fun Pendulum decks for sure, so definitely look into it. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.